Hey guys, Stanley C here. I just came back from a Cassandra Jenkins concert in the city and I couldn't be happier. Her playfulness with the crowd and the costume theme, Petco theme, which is really fun, made the experience really delightful and interesting, as well as enchanting. Cassandra Jenkins has been making a name for herself in the New York indie scene for a few decades now. At first, as an alternative folk artist with country elements, Jenkins' music was fundamentally forward thinking and carefully written. Thanks to the breakthrough record and overview on phenomenal nature, a wider audience became aware of her gorgeously nebulous and thoughtful music. From this point forward, her songs took on a more hazy chamber pop feel that was equal parts hypnotic and orchestral. There was a musical maturity to its production that rocked the critics' world as well as impressed audiences around the globe in her live shows. This past summer, she dropped her highly anticipated third album, My Light, My Destroyer, and pushed her sound forward into a more rock-based territory with aggressive riffs and punchier hooks. Still, her music remained concerned with the pursuit of truth and humankind's position in the world, and even more so in the universe. My conversation with Jenkins covers the process to creating her incredible trio of albums, as well as her 2013 self-titled EP. I was also curious about her methodology to incorporating field recordings in her albums and can't wait to share her answer with you all. It's really interesting it's very unique what she actually said. Jenkins has frequently described herself as shy and more introverted. In our conversation, you may see a little of that, but for the most part, she's quite charming, wicked smart, delightful, and present with her answers. We cover a lot of ground and go deep into a number of questions from her growing concept on self growth, where the music industry fails to support musicians, her 2024 tour, and much more. It's a great conversation. Like, comment, share it with your friends, especially if they're Cassandra Jenkins fans. She's only growing from here. And it was an honor to talk with her. Enjoy the conversation. Here is Cassandra Jenkins. Welcome, everyone, to the If Ever You're Listening podcast. I'm your host, Stanley C. of the If Ever You're Listening Substack. And today we have a very special guest, Cassandra Jenkins, ambient pop, chamber pop, singer-songwriter, however you want to describe her music. I find it just a very calming and meditative space that they've created throughout their discography. And today I want to talk with them about a plethora of things, growing up in a family band, which I always find very fascinating, the connections or the bridges between their music and their albums, as well as their current project that came out this past summer, My Light, My Destroyer, which is fantastic. And
Thank you.
they're on tour right now. So I'm curious about how the tour is going. We caught them in the middle of tour, which
Yeah.
very honored to have a chance to kind of see. I have a question like how's the tour been going? And if there's any cool memories right now from tour. Um, so I guess that's a
Yeah.
cool place to start. Kind of how is the tour going from your perspective?
The tour has been up and down as tour always goes. And just so you know, the reason I'm fidgeting a little bit is because I wanted to just get a backup recording, and I forgot to do that before we started.
Yeah.
And yeah, I tour is a really fascinating and unpredictable way to spend your time and live your life.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to have that sort of like zoomed out perspective on it, to because it helps me appreciate what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And right now, so you're actually catching me at home because I'm right between. I did an East Coast tour, a West Coast tour, and I'm about to go to Europe.
Nice.
So I'm really just kind of still on tour. I'm home, but I'm very much still on tour and thinking about those logistics. And we're actually about to play a show the night before Halloween at the Music Hall of Williamsburg. So I've got an at home show like on tour, which is also really fun. Um, and yeah, I would say we had a rough start to tour, but we were still just like welcomed in the with the most warm reception you could be. There are a lot of different ways tour can be rough, but the way, for me, luckily, it's just been like mostly logistics has been the most difficult part. And we had, one bandmate got COVID and had to drop out for our first show. And we were flying into Chicago and, all those last minute unexpected twists and turns have to be factored in. But then, it's live music, which is a living, breathing thing.
Mm.
So it is in some ways like the most flexible. But of course, to make myself at ease and comfortable on tour if I can, I try for it to not be like infinitely flexible. I'd like for there to be some structure, and part of that is having a consistent band and this, playing songs that we know, everything could be completely free and improvised all the time. But for what I'm doing, I think some structure is really helpful.
No.
So when wrenches get thrown in like that, um, it's a challenge. But what happens is you find people along the way who want to support you and help you, and then ultimately like a room full of people who are just rooting me on.
Mm.
Um, so despite the difficulty, there's also just, first of all, the appreciation of the fact that there's a lot of support out there. Um, and and second of all, like just a sort of self-acceptance of just, I am where I am today. I'm not the imaginary version of myself who's playing every note perfectly and who's uh just got it 100% together. I'm just exactly where I am today. So how do I do that? And it's that kind of flexibility that I think it's a great challenge to be able to rise to. But I have to keep it in check. I want to also not keep my nervous system in a constant state of stress.
Yes. And you're an experienced touring artist. I'm curious if this tour has been uniquely difficult because of the factors you mentioned, or have you seen every tour has their own um miscellaneous issues that you can't predict or
Literally every day of every tour. Like, I'm not exaggerating. There's something, there's so many variables.
yeah.
There's so many things that need to line up for a show to happen. It's kind of crazy. I like to think of shows as sort of mythical creatures that
Mm.
it has to be really a perfect storm of things that come to be. And each and every person being there that night, it's like they have to get off work on time. Their babysitter needs to show up. Like the traffic conditions need to be okay. There's not a natural disaster happening. They don't have a cold. Like all of those things could be happening, but instead they made it.
Mm.
You made it, and so did all these other people, and that's sort of a miracle. So coming at it from that vantage point, like it is hard to be upset when you're finally there on the stage and the lights go up, um so it's unsustainable to be in like everything's a miracle like mindset all the time, but I do have to bring that to the table,
Mm.
in order for it to in order to do my job. I have to be in touch with a little bit of the like, I can't believe this is working.
And my last tour question, a more fun, lighthearted one is, do you have a costume for next week's show in Williamsburg? Or is
That's Yeah, that's literally all I'm thinking about right now. I I it's really hard for me not to go into the most manic Halloween preparation. This is I am a Halloween person. I think it's a divisive holiday. Some people will just like hate it
Yeah.
for whatever, reason. I don't know if it's the chaos of like millions of people in costume and whatever demons that brings out, or if it's the traffic or what. But I love Halloween, and I love getting dressed up, and I often think of the costume very last minute, and it becomes a race to the finish line of like, how can I make this idea a reality? And yeah, I tend to put all of my energy into it. And it's
Well,
often coinciding with fall tours. So
yeah.
with, tour is it is full steam ahead, like 100% of my effort, all the time, from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep. And
Mhm.
so when Halloween falls into that, Halloween becomes uh it as kind of passionately attuned to, or I become as invested in Halloween as I am in a show. So I'm trying not to kill myself with this crafting mission, but uh, I guess it won't be a spoiler alert by the time this is
No.
out.
Yeah, this will be out after.
So I am making, I decided that my band and I, because we're playing on the 30th,
Mhm.
uh, we will be in costume. And I thought the best costume for us to band together on is to all be Petco employees. And so
Yeah.
I'm making I'm making Petco costumes right now. And I'm trying to figure out, like, how do you allow that to register from stage? Like, there's going to be a little Petco logo polo shirts. I decided, even though that's not really the Petco uniform, they really wear t-shirts, but
Mhm.
I feel like polo shirt reads as employee.
Yes.
There's got to be a name tag with a
Yes.
title. And then, of course, the Petco logo. I think I'm going to exaggerate, because everything on stage has to be exaggerated, whether it's like makeup or personality. But it's the logo is going to be maybe larger than life, and then I'll probably put another logo on the back. And if anyone wants to sue me, it's Halloween. It's satire, so try me.
No, that's gonna be fantastic. I can't wait for
uh,
pictures to come out. I'll try to be there. I live nearby, so
Oh
I'll
my
try.
God, please come. Well,
Yeah, I'll do my
let
best.
me know, and we'll make sure that we have a ticket for you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Yes, yes. This is very exciting. Sneak peek. Well, not sneak peek for those who are listening, but kind of now you're hearing the thought process behind why or
I'm
how.
also inviting everyone to come in animal costumes. So there is
Yes.
going to be that dynamic, which I'm really looking forward to.
So we're gonna look like the pets at Petco. And you guys are
Yes.
gonna look like the influ. That's gonna be really fun. Oh,
Yes.
that's gonna be really fun.
I am there to take care of you, to like um maybe like find someone for you to leave the store
Yeah.
with. I don't know.
Oh
And
my.
we can take that metaphor in all kinds of directions, um, but I am excited to be the um chief manager of the Petco in our minds on Wednesday night.
There's so many metaphors
I
that
know,
could.
I know, I
I'm
know.
very curious how you're gonna play it in the room at the time.
We'll see. I think it's going to be like um, it's not going to be very consistent. It's going to be jumping around quite a bit.
Oh, outstanding. Outstanding. So I like that you're in the so for the folks listening or watching, Cassandra is in the Upper West Side, and that's where they grew up. And my next question is about growing up, uh, because you grew up in a family band, a folk family band, which I find so fascinating. And I also believe I've read that you're in the brownstone that you grew up in, or around
Yep.
the brownstone that you grew up in, um,
Yeah.
and your parents. It sounds like you have a good relationship with your folks. So I'm curious about what lessons from that period do you find maybe now looking back all these years that that you maybe still apply or maybe you learned from? But how do you look back on that period of your life, those formative family band years?
I've been thinking about it a lot. I yesterday I got together with a friend who has been teaching live performance classes at the Brick. Their name's River Ramirez. Amazing. Like honestly, one of my favorite living performers. Just
Mm,
like such a wonderful artist out there in New York, who explores the realms of comedy and music and honestly spirituality. I don't know if they would say that, but I'm going to go out and say that.
mhm,
And I haven't been able to go to their classes because of tour. And so I did a like a just like a private class with them basically, and we were talking a lot about the ways in which my family dynamic has influenced my stage persona,
mm,
um, which is funny to talk about when you're in my position, which is I feel like my stage persona, quote unquote, is uh, there's not much of a wall between me and persona, whereas like someone with a moniker uh, who has intentionally built a creative identity, might have a very consciously built persona. Mine is just like as is, what you see is what you get. But
mhm.
of course, like there's always going to be a performance when you're on stage. I'm performing. Whether or not I'm performing earnestness or trying to channel a certain mood in a song, whatever it is, um, I have to be honest with myself about the fact that I am a performer. I am on stage, and there is always going to be some kind of like layer there. Uh, and in my family band, the stage persona was like wholesome, kind of grand old opry, banter, a little bit Prairie Home Companion, a little bit vaudevillian and
Mm,
parlor style entertainment. Like,
yeah.
it's kind of like we sing, we dance, and it's I have a family full of hams. Everyone is a ham. I am too, but I am the like deadpan one that doesn't want to admit that they are, and that's kind of like I'm kind of like the straight man in the dynamic,
Yep.
and the one who rolls their eyes at the puns and but secretly is like
They like
that
the.
was yeah, of course I do. But the rolling of the eyes is just going to egg you on even more. Like
Mm,
that's like my role in my family. Um, but when I'm on stage and I'm getting a little bit nervous and there's like silence, I'm not really sure how to read the room, that like corny part of me starts to emerge. And I'm always just like, oh no, there it is. Like, stop, don't, no, not now. Like you've come so far. And then like out come the dad jokes. And I'm just like, oh yeah, yay. Like Chicago was our first show of this tour, and I mentioned it was rough because it was just like a lot of stuff was going wrong logistically, and I was nervous and just not feeling very grounded. And oh my God, I started telling jokes, and I was like, no, not in Chicago. No, this is like a center of what are you doing? No, no. But I actually admitted that to the audience, and it was actually kind of fun. And I think that's sort of what I'm focusing on is um, allowing that part of me to exist, the part of me that is like in the wholesome family band and making like really corny jokes, and let them exist, but also uh, be very aware and um, transparent about that person being in the room.
mm.
I hope that makes sense. You've gotten quite a bit of an interior look at what the family band dynamic has
Oh,
the impression that it's had on me. Um,
that's fantastic. And I even as a solo performer, I've seen a progression in even the way you've talked about yourself and your music. as well as kind of your appearance on stage. There's a lot of growth and changes that I'm seeing, and it's good that it sounds like you're becoming more maybe who you are authentically,
Yeah, I
um
hope so.
and whether that's how much of the family you want inside of you out as I think as we all try to deal with. It's like, do we all
Yeah.
become our father or our mother?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Well, we also, we host house concerts here at my house, and that's also been just in a very simple, straightforward way, like a huge influence on me. I grew up playing in very small, intimate spaces,
Mhm.
parlor entertainment, like at its best, it's really just people in a room playing for each other. That's all it is. And it's like kind of got this pure quality to it of just um very simple entertainment uh and feeling the energy in a small room. But then, I was just also talking to another friend this morning about how as I get older, I really love my parents more and more and just want to share them with the world. And I was laughing because I was like, I literally put my mom on my record because I
Yeah.
just like want to share her with everyone. And yeah, I think as I get older, I start to appreciate them more and their sort of life story and their life path now that I can step back from it as an adult. Now entering ages where, my parents were 35 when they had me, and I'm 40. So, you know, I'm now entering, there's this like crossfade that's happening where when I entered their life, I'm now that age. Like I've actually passed it. So I think there is this interesting shift that happens when you cross over into that side.
And I feel like you may see your parents differently too when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And your relationship with them shifts. I'm curious also about there's a period I think in your story that I just see a lot of not a lot of information, I should say. And I'm
Mm,
just curious how you would describe it. So I'm thinking about the period after the New Yorker
mm,
and your debut EP, which I was playing a lot the last couple, like the 2013, 2014 EP. And
yeah.
describe maybe that period because it sounded like that was when you were playing bars or playing
Mm,
parlor shops and country bands, folk
yep.
bands,
Yeah.
and really trying to like hone your sound, make a name for yourself. But then you come out of it as a solo artist or maybe a head of a band, however you would
Mm,
describe yourself. So, um, how was that period in terms of where did you see incremental progress? Was there
mm.
positive feedback, and what kept you motivated and keep going during that period of your life?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I was quite young, and I think I was sort of reveling in the lostness of it all. I think I had left a job that gave me a tremendous sense of belonging,
Hmm.
uh, and TBH clout. Like I feel like to identify with an institution that I really admired, like gave me a great amount of confidence and a sense of, yeah, a sense of place, a sense of belonging. I belong to this institution. That's my context for the world. And when you take that away, it can be like pulling the rug out from under yourself to leave a really um, just esteemed institution. And I think I'm sure people, when they graduate from college, go through a similar thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm not part of this institution anymore. I'm now just a person in the world, and I think a lot of us leave college, especially those of us who went to art school, which I did, leave college with a tremendous amount of confidence that maybe is not quite earned, but just assumed
Mhm.
confidence or blind confidence going out into the workforce and whatnot. And our first job sometimes sort of is a bit of a rude awakening. I think it was both that and also just what an incredibly inspiring place to be. Like the writers that I met and the
Mhm.
staff and just the friends that I made there are still some of my dearest, closest friends. Like it was such an important time in my life. And then I left. And I was like, I am nobody. I'm just no, I am, I can't get a job at a coffee shop because I'm quote unquote overqualified.
Mm,
Um, I'm I'm patching together like weird freelance projects and totally unstructured time. I I haven't been spending any time making art because I've been working a very demanding job, and I feel out of touch with my creative community. And so I was just kind of out there like flailing. And I want to remind myself and anyone else who feels like they're flailing that that's actually like such a rich uh, moment in your life, when you're so wide open that it's so scary at times, but you're a sponge and you can do anything.
mm,
And I think I kind of did that. I just, anyone who asked me to play in their band, I was like, yes. And anything that excited me, I followed it. And I was sometimes spending my last dollar on my Halloween costume, but I was living a very vibrant life, and I went from, I was sort of apartment hopping. I moved like 6 times, I think, in just 2 years, and um, yeah, it was chaotic, but I was definitely living like a really beautiful existence, like absorbing so much of what New York City had to offer too. Like
mm,
there's so much life here going on that's available to the public for free if you're looking for it, like art openings and shows and warehouse parties that might change your life if you're ready for that,
mm,
and I met my friends who have continued, I followed my intuition in terms of like the people that I wanted to shape my life. And that's when I met like Ula, um, who is the Norwegian photographer that I stayed with when I wrote an overview on phenomenal nature. Like I definitely made that friend during that period when he visited my open studio in Bushwick, and I was doing a lot of photography at the time. And I made lifelong friends during that period who really have shaped the course of my life. And next thing you know, like 10 years later, his photographs are my album cover, and I've
mm,
written songs about what it is to jump in the ocean at the foot of his door, with him and his partner kind of like holding space for me. So it just, yeah, that's very long-winded, but it's all to say like I was very lost and I was exploring and just following my intuition. And that's when I met Eleanor Friedberger. She asked me to
mm,
go on tour with her for one tour, which was a tremendously like influential tour. Um, I also went on my first tour was with the band Uncle Earl. We went to Australia. I was playing banjo.
oh,
I
nice.
mean, yeah, I had a business card at the time that said, uh, it was like, oh, I wish I could remember what the tagline was, but it was basically like Cassandra Jenkins, and then it had maybe 25 little check boxes, and next to each of them was like an occupation, and it was just like check off whichever one you need, and I'll just do that.
Yeah.
And some of them were kind of like silly and surreal, and some of them were very real. It was like graphic designer, banjo
Mm,
player, like singer songwriter. You know, I can't. I'll try to send it to you if I can
yeah.
find it.
That could be like the picture for the interview.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a phase in life. Like if someone
So
handed me
funny.
that card right now, I'd be like, "Oh, girl, you are lost as fuck." But like, go good on you. Like, get that.
But it seems like what really helped you at that time though was your ability to kind of stay open and observe your surroundings and be a sponge, as you said, soak it in,
Yeah,
which
I really did.
which I really
Yeah.
like in your music. Which is my next question, because you have so many unique, I think of them as uniquely styled skits. So, or even field recordings. They sound more like field recordings than skits in on
Mm.
your albums. And this ability to be very observant and to kind of take in your surroundings. Where did that inspiration come from to have these types of skits, which you don't see often in other albums? They're very like controlled, and you could tell there's like they're written out, and but yours feel very real, and a lot of them probably are real. I would love to hear you kind of describe recording birds chirping or your conversation with your mom about
Yeah.
space and talking with
Yeah.
security guards.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I refer to a lot of my experience of walking around New York City as street theater. Of course, it's not scripted,
Hmm.
but when you're observing it from a certain lens, you are taking it in and sort of like mentally recording it as theater,
Yeah.
um, when you become the observer, right? And I feel like it's great to keep that lens in your back pocket for when you want to pop it on and say, like, I'm the observer. And sometimes it's really helpful to do that with your family. It's maybe a form of dissociation, but it's also a form of, I think it's also an art form. And it's up to you, like how much you want to what degree you want to be in that headspace. But uh, I've never scripted anything. I have sometimes like edited a little bit of space out of things to keep the pacing uh, appropriate for a listener.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that is maybe the extent of the manipulation that I want to do. I did also publish like the security guard from Hard Drive. I ended up publishing like her entire monologue in another version of Hard Drive that's out there. Um, and so you can kind of hear what I chose to keep, which is its own editing process. And that's its own, that's like writing is to me is like editing out what I have observed. And then uh yeah, I had a couple other thoughts. I mean, you do hear I'm thinking of I can't think of what specific songs, but I'm thinking of like some De La Soul recordings where you do hear like these little they are like these like tiny little plays inside of the thing, and they're so fun and they inform the music so much, and they infuse it with so much character that you're not necessarily going to get from just the songs. So and those really shaped my my character and like the way that I listen to music. So I feel like I am aware of that use of people's voices in recording, but I am choosing to take only what has been recorded as a field recording, as found
Mm.
sound, as found art. I
Yeah.
am taking what exists and I am putting it together. There, you can feel the artist in it, just like like whatever, Deschamps' toilet.
Yeah.
Uh, like you feel the artist there because he has chosen to put it in the gallery, but it is just a toilet. So I feel like for me, it's kind of the same. I'm saying like, hey, I found it this way, but I am framing it for you, and the frame is an important um, element here. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. I think my only other question for that is where did where did you find the inspiration to take that risk of using the authentic recording, using the street recording versus, or was it just you didn't think that it was unique, you kind of just went with it? Because I
As
imagine
opposed to what's the alternative?
the alternative is to write a skit and say, "Hey guys, we're gonna make a skit and pretend to have this conversation about this more nebulous kind of philosophical um, topic."
Yeah, I think there's no question about it for me. If the intention is to be, you know, sharing intimacy and like I think for me, I want to encourage active listening in people, listening to the person that you see every day, that you take for granted, that you can easily tune out. Listen to them.
Mm.
And I think that's really different from saying, like, here's this idea that I have that I want to share with you, and I'm going to contrive it in such a way that I can present it to you in this palatable way. I think it's more about like paying attention to the moments that are very fleeting and can easily be overlooked. Um, maybe there will be, maybe on my next album, I'm going to have something scripted. That would be a very interesting turn for me because at this point, I haven't been interested in that at all. I'm way more interested in um, both the act of listening in my life. Recording provides that practice for me, but also, then having a record of that, which I can then share with people. So it's to me they're like night and day, a very different use of of the voice, and I think you can you can feel it, and you can feel when someone's like presenting a script to you, and we do that all the time. Like we go to a play to be presented a script and an idea and to be taken into a place that's been crafted.
Mm.
And I'm saying like I'm not crafting this, I'm simply capturing.
I love that about your music. The way I describe it, it's fun to describe your music to people when I was like, okay, I'm interviewing this artist, and they're like, who's Cassandra? If they didn't know you. And then I would describe it feels like you're going into like nature or the forest and you're just listening. And the
Yeah.
music is like what you would hear in this location, at a beach, in the forest, at a park. And you're hearing people have a conversation. And I just find that really cool how you've consistently been able to do that throughout
Thanks.
multiple projects. And it may, I just, you have a really unique presence in music, and I want you to keep making that music, which made me sad when I found out that there was a point in your career, famously noted around 2020, when you were considering shifting your expectations around music, or even some were even saying quitting music, but I've seen you corrected that to say not necessarily quitting, but just changing your expectations.
Yeah, I think it is really important. Like I'm like pro I'm sort of like pro abandoning your ideas about what your life should look like in any given trajectory, and re-examining your expectations for what that's going to be, especially when you're faced with certain disappointment, and you realize that like maybe your reality and your expectations are not aligned. I think that's when you start to question, what am I doing here and what are my intentions? And I think for me, it's just an evaluation of yeah, what my intentions are. And the correction that I want to make, it's like really more self-correction of just saying like, just so you know, I wasn't ever in this state where I was like ready to throw my guitar out the window and just be like, I'm gonna be a mailman now or something. Like it was never eh, like I'm turning my back on music. But I think it is important to talk about the difference between a career in the landscape of the music industry today, which is so fucking brutal. Let's just talk about how brutal it is.
I have questions for that at the end. I want to hear your
Um,
thoughts.
yeah, it is not conducive for creativity. It is everything as a product.
Yes.
What like that, it's so not
That's
what
Harvard.
our human drive for creating music and dancing is. Like we dance and we make music to survive. um when that survival gets caught up in monetary value, it really becomes a problem that requires like solving, and that is art and commerce. That is an age old conversation. But for me, I had to go through it again this summer after my album came out, and I realized I spent all the money I was given to make that album, and it's going to be a long time before I see any returns on that. And how am I going to make my living? And I, again started to evaluate my worth according to the financial gains of my art, which were very few and far beyond, and will be for some time.
Mm.
So my my self-esteem and my confidence just plummeted once my record came out because I saw that my potential income was very low. And I took a minute to then turn around and say, hey, you're doing that thing again where you are evaluating your self-worth according to your financial and by your art. And those all of those things, it's a very dangerous thing to mix up. And it's a recipe for in my case depression.
Mm.
And uh I'm gonna hit that again and again with music. Unless somehow I become a TikTok star and start making millions overnight. Um, I'm gonna be facing that difficulty. So how do I do that? How do I approach that? And I think, you know, leading up to making my album, I had one version of that, which was I was very depleted from touring, which is also not a very financially rewarding lifestyle. It's also very physically exhausting, chemically exhausting. And um, when you get home from the end of all of that, you know, what do you have to say for it? And it's really, it's just on a purely human individual level. There's a lot of wonderful things, like the amount of people that I was able to connect with. Like there, you can't put value on that. Like um, that's it's a priceless thing to be able to hold space for each other and our collective experience and emotion. Is it's priceless, it's invaluable. So you know that's a lot of words.
No, I love it. I think this is a great interview so far. I'm getting answers out of you that I haven't heard elsewhere to this kind of angle, and I'm liking this perspective because I feel like your music is very reflective, is very meditative, is very thoughtful, and I wanted to hear kind of where those thoughts are coming from, what directions, where are you feeling pressures, um, and where do you kind of find the inspiration to make these very thoughtful albums that are like field
Yeah,
recorded?
I think that was like part of your other question too, is
Mhm.
like, okay, we understand where the crisis lies, but like where does the inspiration lie? Um, I think first of all, before inspiration, there has to be a certain like reckoning and self-awareness. And I think that's sort of also what I've already described. And then I a writer that I really loved talking to is Grayson Curran, who writes for, you know, a lot of wonderful publications, including the Times. And uh, we we were talking about something that I was trying to describe as like when you're dealing with the creative curve, the peaks and valleys of creativity, there might be a moment where you think that you've done something and then you realize like there's a lot more work to do.
Mhm.
And he described it from hiking terms as being a false peak.
Ooh.
And like that's a literal kind of like relationship to the landscape. And uh, I think when you can then see what's actually ahead of you,
Mm.
and you have to kind of like prepare yourself for it, but when you can see it, I think that's a really important motivating factor of just being like, okay, now I can see where I'm going. Before I wasn't quite sure, then I had to deal with the fact that like I thought I was there and I wasn't. And yeah, I think just knowing that there's something to climb and just like being at that space where you're able to accept like, oh, I'm not there yet, but I'm ready to do the rest of it. That's a little bit abstract, but I think I get a lot of motivation from my community. I get a lot of motivation from my friends. When I carve out space for my relationships and my community, that's when I start to feel like I'm living my life. If I'm banging my head against the wall in the studio and saying like, I'm not an artist unless I create art or whatever kind of like uh, neuroses we put on ourselves as artists, like I think as soon as I just start to let go of it and connect with a friend and belly laugh about something, you know, really silly and forget about the art with a capital A, I think that's when I start to feel motivated, and when in a on a very chemical level, just like those chemicals start to swim around and create new associations um, and basically like a foundation for new work and new life.
No, thank you for that. And another theme I found in your music is this idea of growth, or this concept around growth, especially I think more in the first album, um, and a little bit in observations. But from this point in your life, kind of how, going along with what we're talking about, how do you see the concept of growth now? Like, what does growth mean to you at this point versus what it meant to you in 2017, 2016 as an artist or as a person? Because the first album sounded a lot
Mm.
like you were trying to win at something, but there's a lot of internal things you needed to kind of overcome. Disappearing was a big phrase
Mm.
that was used a lot, and this idea of kind of taking space for yourself for the
Mm.
sake of growth. But where does what does growth, that word, mean to you now?
I think every album presents its own um, little university school of growth, and I think for those older albums, it was way more about growth, technical growth, um, and getting better at learning techniques in the recording studio and my guitar playing and um, vocal runs. But as I get older, my efforts turn a little bit more inward, uh, simultaneously outward, because I'm more interested in how I feel in a room and how the people in the room feel when I am holding, when I'm on a stage. And how can I create spaces for people to feel expansive, to feel a sense of freedom, to feel a sense of like uh, freedom of thought and a safety to be there while simultaneously creating that for myself. Um, and I don't think I can create that space for others unless I've really focused on myself first and making sure that I have created a space for myself to feel free and not constricted by the pressures that are very easy to put on your art. Often those pressures come from comparing yourself to others and comparing yourself to expectations that may or may not be realistic. So
Mm.
I think right now I'm really focusing inward and trying to make sure that I'm creating a grounded space to explore and in doing so to create that space for other people. And yeah, the most important thing to me in a room these days, and the music that I'm writing will be the sort of conduit for that, um, is it used to be like I want to play these guitar parts perfectly, and if I don't, I feel a sense of failure. And
Mm.
now I'm like, I don't care what happens on the guitar if everyone is feeling good and like feeling something uh, beyond the everyday, then we're getting somewhere. Whatever needs to happen for that to happen is what that's my job, and it's a wonderful job, and it's a job that involves a lot of unknowns. So yeah, that's
No,
growth for me is like how can I continue to grow really as a person so that I can continue to support others in their growth really.
mm. Well, the music is full of those ideas of how do you find it within yourself and in the people around you, the community, the earth around you. I think what I love about My Light, My Destroyer is that you're taking us now outside of Earth into the cosmos, um, and kind of talk more about your relationship with the cosmos with space. Was this something that maybe as a younger person you were always interested in, or is this a newer phenomenon that you're because I know you talked a little bit about your mom and how she was showing you uh Orion's belt and different elements of
Yeah.
the cosmos. And so how I guess since the album came out, how has space been a part of your life?
It's continued to expand. I I think it's both like a necessary perspective to include in our life, and of course, not every minute of every day, but hopefully I just encourage you to go back to the Hayden Planetarium since you are in the neighborhood a fair amount. Like it feels so good to me to go there and like feel like a speck on on the dot in the universe, you know. And for me, that's like therapy. It's like, oh yeah, that like, you know, thing that happened the other day where I said that stupid thing and I'm gonna beat myself up over it for all day. I can just be like, oh, I'm gonna forget about that because I am a speck on a speck on a speck, you know. And I'm pretty sure that all that stuff out there isn't worried about that stupid thing that I said, you know.
Yeah.
It helps all of the egoistic concerns kind of like a little bit of a palate cleanser. Um, and you know, there's so much to learn. And that's the other thing. It's like just a nice reminder to get out of my own head and be like, wait, I could be curious about this thing instead of focusing so much on my neuroses. And Yeah, I continue to go to planetariums. I did a planetarium show uh, at the Girls Club, which is a educational center in the East Village. There's a really great planetarium up on 135th Street. So again, if you're up at Columbia, like not too far off. And I think those are like every Wednesday now. Just one of the physics professors there got the keys to the planetarium at CCNY and is putting on these incredible, like improvised tours of the cosmos. Like
Wow.
I feel like it's a little bit fringe right now because I feel like planetariums were such a big thing in like the 80s when they were developed and then they kind of fell asleep.
Hmm.
And I'm kind of like, guys, there's still some people out there like making
Yeah.
this happen and it's so cool. And I've been trying to go to these planetarium events. I've gone to some at the Museum of Natural History and I think the people at the planetariums too are trying to figure out like how do we get people interested in this again?
And there's this movement now, and you do address this in the album, like Blue Origin and with
Hmm.
William Shatner going to space and SpaceX, I know is popular right now. So I feel like but that's kind of the corporate side of it. There's like
It's very corporate,
where's
yeah.
the curiosity, kind of the Bill Nye, the science guy of it all, kind of,
Right.
and the youthful curiosity for it. I don't see that as much. I agree with you.
I know. I mean, we have like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, also as like space guys. And um, uh, I love watching Neil deGrasse Tyson videos on YouTube. Sometimes that's how I go to sleep at night.
I love that.
I'm like, tell me more about black holes and dark matter and things I still like really don't understand. And yeah, I think it is interesting that there is this corporate side to space. It's like, okay, we can make anything capital. Like it's just kind of insane.
It's
But I
Matt.
think that's why the William Shatner story is so interesting, is because you have this character who's known as a space captain, which just adds like a comical layer to it. That's just amazing. But I think about him and sort of the overview effect that he experienced and talks about as kind of puncturing that corporate space thing that we're talking about. And I'm like, that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the psyche and how it relates to this. And yeah, I'm less interested in like mm, colonizing space.
Yeah. Which is
Um,
what we're talking about now.
which brings me to my last obsession, which is Star Trek.
Yeah, Trekkie. I am not a Trekkie, but I appreciate all the Trekkies. I was on the Star Wars end of it, even
Okay.
though they're not mutually exclusive. I don't know why I always thought they were, but
They're very different. They're
they
not to be
felt
confused. Yeah.
yeah, they felt very different growing up, and I felt
I think that's true.
I liked the Star Wars end of it. But
Yeah, I mean, it's still it awaits you.
exactly. But thank you for putting the William Shatner piece in your album because it led me to reading his essay on his experience of the overview.
Oh, cool.
I was
Cool.
doing that this week, and that was really, really cool. And and the fact that he felt more gratitude and more care for the earth as a result, I thought was really nice and important for more people to read. So I hope after this interview, more people read it. A lot of
Thank you.
my subscribers are artists, young artists, artists trying to start. And so a lot of what you're saying, I hope it resonates with artists about taking in your surroundings, being a sponge, letting go, not being afraid to let go, and shifting your
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, and following whatever it is that you're obsessed with. Like it doesn't matter what it is, go there. Even if you're like, why am I obsessed with aquariums right now? I don't know. But like follow that. It will take you somewhere and it might surprise you. I think that's what a friend of mine kind of gave me that advice while I was feeling particularly riddled with sort of unknowns. And so I want to just pass on their advice.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, those conclude my artist specific questions. So the questions I've written up specific for your career. Now I'm going to transition us into the if ever you're listening question. So my blog is called If Ever You're Listening. I like how we're talking about listening. This was not prompted. I did not tell Cassandra to say listen, 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 listen.
Oh, that's
It's
funny.
very natural. So you're like
I
you're
mean, we found each other, it's just like it
yes,
makes sense.
exactly. So um these questions I ask to all artists that I interview, and they're a lot about the music industry, a lot about your personal relationship with music. And I just love to hear your opinions. So the first one is a fun question, which it doesn't have to be a new album, doesn't have to be a new artist. It could be something that you're just listening to recently. But what are you listening to these days? What has been maybe an album that you've enjoyed in October or September? Or
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna just like look through my actually I can do it by memory. There's a few that I've been kind of obsessed with. I keep talking about the Duffy Ullman record.
I did see that one. I have to. I saved it. I watched an interview and you mentioned Duffy.
It's so great.
I have no idea who that is. So now I'm like curious. I was like, what? Who is
You
that?
might, there's an artist named Hand Habits. Have you heard their music?
I have heard a hand. That sounds. Yeah. Wait.
Um, so the person whose moniker that is Meg Duffy.
I
They also play with Perfume Genius, which is where I've kind of run into them a lot over the years.
love Perfume Gin.
So yeah, I think that they're more familiar to you than you realize. And so this is their instrumental guitar music, which is really fun when you know some of the other. I'm someone who as a kid, especially, I was like really obsessed with. If I was obsessed with a band, I was obsessed with every person in the band. What is their side project? What are they about? And like, what is the kind of like and never ending web of people like and so I think I still continue to be that way and I love Meg's instrumental stuff. Another record, and I'm gonna just visit my text messages so I get the titles right, that I was listening to um, in a similar vein, and then I'll give you a slightly more like grounded record. But I was texting Andrew laughing about it. Um, because I thought he would like it and it turns out he knew it. So no surprises there. But let me just find it's a another instrumental record and it's called Distance of the Moon. It's by Nora Stanley and Benny Bach. And
Ooh,
again, it's on this label called Colorfield Records that focuses on the side projects of folks who are often supporting other artists. Um,
so cool.
so Distance of the Moon is very sax heavy, which, as you know, I love. and it goes all over the place. The first one is kind of almost sci-fi sounding, and then some of it sounds like a little bit more straight ahead jazz. It goes all over the place. It's very colorful. And I was listening to it on the subway on my ride home the other night, and it just felt like good subway music. The other record that I've been listening to more recently is I don't know how to pronounce their name, but I'm gonna pull up the album. I've been listening to it. It's called Suntub, ML Book,
Luke.
Buch.
Okay.
Buck,
Buch. Buck? Buke?
Buke, Book, or Buck. I should look into this.
No, we're gonna put it out there. I'm gonna share this list after, and you,
Yeah,
the listener, can read it and find out. But I like how I want to say Bach because it's like almost Bach, but it's not.
I
There's
know.
but
JS
no.
Bach, ML Book. Yeah.
So remind me what this album sounds like. What is the genre?
Um, there's uh there there's songs. So there's song structures here. And there's a lot of really beautiful sounds. It has a real specific palette to it, which I really appreciate. I think it takes you into its world and keeps you there. Um, a lot of guitar playing and beautiful, sort of like some electronic drums, some live drums, and then uh voice. And great songwriting and just it's a really captivating record in this way where you're like, I don't know what this is, but I can't stop.
Mm,
And I've just been really enjoying some of the sounds on it. And again, like it was my driving record yesterday. I was driving a lot around New York, and it has like a really nice pace to it. So I really love that record a lot.
beautiful. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
your music does the same. I think the first song I've heard of yours was Ambiguous Norway. And I was
Cool.
like, what is this? How, like, it didn't even feel like I was in where I was. Felt like it was like taking me outside of myself, um, to a space to a spacious space. So I wanted to thank you for making that song.
That's
And
great.
it was the blue pill or the red pill. I forgot which in the Matrix it is, but the one that takes you to the next the next
Yeah, I
chapter.
never like got on board with that discussion. I saw so much stuff about it, and I was just like, I don't think I want to get in here.
That's
Uh,
interesting because I feel like you're always thinking about kind of reality and truths in your music and
for sure. I mean, maybe I need to go back and watch The Matrix, and that's my next concept album. I don't know. But yeah, but there were just so many like dark conversations around like red and blue, and I was just like,
that's true.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna like I'm gonna wait until this all blows over, and then I'll get into it, you know?
Yeah, political kind of like socio-political
Yeah.
conversation aside,
Yeah.
just the
Yes.
Matrix.
Okay, I think I can come at it from a pure standpoint, and I will when I watch it again.
Yeah. But my next question is about your music. So from your perspective, over the course of your career, what song or songs of yours do you find the most underappreciated and why?
Underappreciated. I like that. Um, hmm, I'm gonna look at my discography. The
Mm,
first one that comes to mind is this song. I think I'm like at peace with things being underappreciated, especially if they like are things that just come back around again and again in different forms.
yeah.
And there's this song called Telephone Ghost on my EP that I like love.
Great
And
song.
I think it really channeled something for me that was important. And it also was a challenge that I think I struggled with. I really wanted to get like a Ebo sounding like Rip Eno guitar thing going, but I didn't know what an Ebo was at the time. So I like didn't know how to get that sound. And I love that I was searching for something. I didn't quite land on it. I landed somewhere else, but I was so it was so much the early beginnings of my recording career. So there was just a lot of information I didn't have at my fingertips. But that song is just really about like this transmission from the spiritual realm through technology. And it's like, oh, I'm still doing that. I'm still so obsessed with that.
Mm.
And that's a song. I wrote it on my little Casio keyboard in my bedroom late one night. I was like in a Casio phase and I wrote that song. And it was very much about my grandfather calling me in my sleep. I was dreaming and my grandfather called me on the phone. And when I picked up, I heard the song Stardust, the jazz standard, being played on a pedal steel guitar through a talk box.
Wow.
It was like very specific and I'll never forget it. I like picked up and it was like almost like hold music. And
Mm,
hold music again came back in My Light, My Destroyer. That's the French speaking song is hold music. It's kind of the same like transmissions from another
mm.
place, you know. Um, so I feel like it was an early concept song that presents as being this like dinky little Casio thing. Um, and then uh should I just do like one from each album or is there just
I would love that. Yeah, one from each album.
um then that was my EP. Play Till You Win is Hotel Lullaby
Beautiful.
is again like I'm obsessed with hotels and it's very much about the punchline is kind of this odd punch. It's not really a punchline, but the line no one's home in a hotel lullaby and it's just about this transient space where no one is at home. But it's kind of this like no one's home as a phrase is sort of funny to me. It's like hello, anybody there? Like anybody if someone seems like a little bit vacant. And then, of course it's that like vacancy in a hotel thing.
Mm,
And that came back in Clams Casino. I reprised that phrase, no one's home at the hotel bar. It's just
that's
this idea that you're just in a room full of strangers, no one is home, everyone is displaced. And it's this kind of like displaced hearts club. And so yeah, that song I think was the beginning of me sort of looking at that idea of like what it means to be at home in yourself, at home in a space. And it talks about the ocean. Again, it's like ocean and hotels. It's all there. So I would say a hotel lullaby. And then an overview on phenomenal nature is such a short one. And I feel like I am lucky that this was uh I feel like this album was so warmly received that
very well received. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say like no one appreciated
That's like, yeah, that might be a hard one to pick it on because I feel like people love that entire project. But what, yeah, maybe I need to look at it too. What doesn't get talked about on that project?
They kind of all
Kind of
do.
all,
I mean, like,
yeah.
sorry, that sounds like so conceited, but
No,
I
I'll
really
say
have
it.
had extensive conversations about each song.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I have a hot take. I think that Haley is my version, my 2021 360,
Ooh,
Charlie XCX.
yeah, yeah. Brat Summer. Okay. I
Okay,
like that.
so 360 is very much an an ode to Julia Fox.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's all about how cool she is and like that it factor of Julia.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like Haley is kind of the same thing. It's like I'm just saying like I need to worship this woman
true.
and I want you to do the same. And like it is this unknowable X factor thing that makes them who they are, that only they can be that thing. And I am just here to bask in the glory.
Mm,
And I'm going to write a song about it, even though that seems like almost awkward, like it's almost awkward to be like, it's a kind of also a classic relationship, like
yeah.
artist and muse. But I think today it's a little bit different. And I think that Haley is again, like it's sort of my 360.
Love that song. And I loved what Haley did with it. I was watching the music video recently.
So much fun. I'm so glad that we did that.
That's incredible. we could even talk about that. But I connect that so because it's kind of like a remix version with how
Yes, it
Charlie
is.
XCX did
Her
a
remixes.
a remix to 360. Like
Yeah.
365 is a remix so I even there's kind of a lot of parallels. I love this.
Yeah. I mean, I love that album, and I actually feel like we're such different artists. I can't compare us, but there are a lot of things on that album that she's analyzing and looking at that I am also in my most recent record of just like, what is it to be a career artist right now? Like, what does that even mean?
Yes.
Um, and then for underappreciated on the last album, hmm, I
I
mean,
have I have
the
one.
only sorry, you have
I
one?
have no, I said I have one, but I want you to pick that one, but so I'm not going to say it out loud.
Well, we can talk about whichever song you want to talk about, really. Um, but I will say the only one that got like openly criticized is the French one, Attends téléphonique. People are like,
Yeah.
why the fuck did you put French on the album? It's like, why fucking not?
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
But I that song is very much it's like it is at it's telephone ghost like many years later. It's like it is just this idea of feeling like a stranger on earth and just saying like, hey, I'm just a visitor here. And it's also a little bit of a conversation with some of Robert Ashley's work.
Mm.
So um all you French song haters out there, like get with Robert Ashley and then talk to me.
Period.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. No, no, that's I like that way better. I was gonna pick tape and tissue, but I think I do
Oh
see
yeah, that's like the deep cut.
it's a
Yeah.
deep cut. It gets a little bit of love in the reviews I've read, but not it doesn't get the big love that
Yeah.
others get. But this is such a good album. It's similar to Overview where I'm seeing a lot of love, but I like how you extended it. So now it's like double the size, but just as good. Double.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
Thank you for
Um,
making it.
yeah, I wrote that song with Andrew Lappin, and it was the first song that we ever wrote together. So if we hadn't done that, I never would have made the record that I made. So it's actually very much at the heart of the record, even though it is the outlier on the record. And yeah, I'm talking about some dark stuff on it and stuff that I probably don't want to get into in an interview, but are important for me to be able to write about. And it might just be the beginning of me learning how to write about it. And like, you know, I think I start out more poetic, and as I become more comfortable with talking about things, I get more direct. So this is a more like it's pretty abstract.
Fantastic. My second to last question. Thank you so much for this conversation. If you could change, and this is kind of like I feel like this is a good build up to what we've been talking about up to this point. If you could change anything about the music industry, what would it be and why?
Mm. Um, let's see. If I could change anything. I mean, it's pretty simple and obvious. The music industry, the only people benefiting from today's music industry are tech billionaires. And um, I mean, they're the main recipients of what the music industry has to offer and major labels.
Mm, sure.
So I don't fall into either of those categories. Neither do any of the people that I work with.
Yeah.
If we could just redistribute that, I mean, that's the problem with the whole planet, right? Like, we
Yeah.
just, it seems so obvious. If we could just send everybody into space for a second so they could get a little bit of what Shatner's having, like, and redistribute the wealth that exists on the planet, and in the music industry, like, it would solve a lot of problems. I don't believe that artists have to be starving to create art. And I think it's a stupid myth that we kind of con ourselves into. and we use that as permission for people to feed off of artists, because we need art, we need music. It does save lives, and it doesn't billionaires. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe they do. Maybe they're giving to charity so that they don't have to pay so much taxes. But I think uh, I really just think we could redistribute the means to live a life that allows for the time and space to be creative. It's simple. Like we don't all need to be owning yachts. We would all benefit from having our basic needs met, and uh, we could all invest in our creativity and in sharing that with one another, and also not just like leave it to the artists who are willing to have a high risk tolerance with their lifestyle. Um, I think that every doctor could benefit from engaging their creativity. I feel like every engineer is ultimately like a creator and a creative spirit. If they can also engage other parts of their brain, like who knows what we're capable of.
Mm.
I think that again, like science and art are very much the same thing, but we're separating them, especially because we live in a capitalist society. Like if we could just flatten that out a little bit, like maybe we'd live in a more peaceful world.
I almost want to end the interview there, but I have one more question. Thank you for that answer. And this is connected.
World peace.
World peace. Please bring more world peace. No, but this what you said is very important and it's resonating deeply with me, and I hope it resonates with the listener. The final question is about advice. So over the course of your career, you've made a lot of great connections. You've met a lot of inspiring people, a lot of advice I'm hearing in the music, which is cool, from real people. But over from your perspective, maybe one to one, the people you've met, what's the best advice you've been given up to this point in your career?
um, Probably, I mean, last night's session with River was really good advice. But it's very much in line with someone who I think we both really admire, which is I've watched some really beautiful interviews with Laurie Anderson, and she has like a series of three pieces of advice. And for some reason, I'm having a hard time being in touch with all of them right now. I should revisit it. But one of them is stay tender.
Mm.
And that's life advice and life for it artists that I think if you ever get stuck or you're frustrated, like it never hurts to remember that, to stay tender, especially with yourself, because tenderness is a softness of being in the world that like allows a lot of things to come in and a lot of things to flow out of you as well. It creates a much more fluid and porous engagement with the world. And so yeah, stay tender might be the number one for me. So my advice is just to watch that Laurie Anderson video.
Link in the description. No.
Yeah, let's find it. There's
We
really a
provide,
beautiful interview with her just advising artists, and I've watched it many times.
I'll send what I think it is to your team and they could either green light it or red
Yeah,
light.
and there's one other interview that I've watched, and that's with David Bowie, where he talks about advice for being an artist that I think is really important, which is if you think of it like swimming in a pool, the best art is going to be created when you can't touch the bottom. But maybe you're just there. But like if you're touching the bottom, you're too comfortable. Like
Mhm.
you're not creating outside of yourself. You're not on the edge. So you want to just be in that place in the water where you're just not able to touch the bottom. And I think that's an uncomfortable space. And that's the space that we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in. So
Cassandra Jenkins, phenomenal. It's been a pleasure. I want to end on that note. On a big,
That's all David Bowie, but
that's
yeah,
all
thank you.
David Bowie. No, but it's channeled through Cassandra Jenkins. No, thank you so much. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to talk to you.